Going all planned.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, my name is, you can see my face over there, Garrett Martin. I'm a professor here in the School of International Service, and I have the distinct pleasure, along with my colleague,
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, co-directors of the Transatlantic Policy Center, Garrett Martin. Mission really is here in the School of International Service, training the next generation of transatlantic scholars, along with my colleague.
Hello, good afternoon.
Co-directors of Transatlantic Policy Center, really, Garrett Martin. Really is here in the School of International Service, training the next generation of transatlantic scholars, along with my colleague.
Good afternoon.
Co-directors of Transatlantic Policy Center, Garrett Martin. Here in the School of International Service, pleasure, along with my colleague.
Good afternoon.
Garrett Martin, here in the School of International Service, pleasure, along with my colleague. Garrett Martin, the year celebration of the episode I wanted to invite us together, along with my colleague. From Ireland as well to understand how much membership. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues who are going to ask a number of questions to the moderators, but fear not, there will be plenty of time from Ireland as well to understand how much membership. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues who are going to ask a number of questions.
No, everybody's focused on Washington to the 30th anniversary of the United States, but we really wanted to highlight the 30th anniversary of Enlarged. And I have to related question. Spain and Portugal both entering the entering at the same time positively change the country's relations. And then both entering the states at the same time join positively change. And I'm wondering about European values, democracy, all the things that we hope from enlargement and membership possibly provide to applicant states.
Thank you very much for inviting us today here. It's a great opportunity for us to share how transformative the European Union has been for both Portugal and Spain, I guess, Ireland too. And it's a pleasure to meet this group of students and professors really willing to know more. Spain was under a tough dictatorship until 1975, and last year we celebrated 50 years of freedom, and now we are celebrating 40 years of joining the European Union. We are also celebrating that we supported the US endeavor for independence and democracy 250 years ago. That brought also to Spain the first constitution. We copied it in 1812 from the American Constitution, but that's another story. We can organize an event for that. So 40 years ago, Spain and Portugal joined the European Union, and that for Spain was the momentum when we abandoned this black and white Spain that I had in my memories when I was a child. Roads were bumpy, and we had no telephones at home. TVs started at 4 o'clock in the evening. So the European Union was a bunch of funding. That was key. Funding. The European Union is based on solidarity. And at that moment, Spain was a recipient of funding and of money to transform absolutely our infrastructures, railways, airports, roads, everything was transformed. And as a result, we are a technicolor society now. The European Union accession meant also transforming our society. And as a result, we are an open society, diverse. We embrace inclusion, we embrace foreigners, we embrace migrants now because we consider it's a moral duty to embrace migrants because we sent people abroad during the dictatorship. So, and Europe has been transformative for us. And Europe keeps on being our big safeguard for everything, for in confronting third parties also.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Professor Martin and Professor Egan, a pleasure to be here with you and also with my colleague Master of Spain, and a pleasure to be back at American University. So I'll go directly to your question and then I will complement what Master Moreno said, because we basically had a similar process in a way before and after the accession to the European Union. So directly to your question, the impact was very big in our bilateral relations, and it was very transformative and in a way very normalizing, if I can put it like that. If you look at the economic relations, for example, until the 80s, until we both acceded to the European Union, Spain was not our first trade partner. And now Spain is by far our first trading partner, both in exports, imports, investment, and so on. And that has to do in part with the fact, well, that has to do mainly with the fact that we were not together in a common integration, European integration process, and partially because Portugal was part of EFTA, of the European Free Trade Association, and Spain was not. So our trade was naturally more directed towards the member states of EFTA. The motherland before acceding to the European Union in the 70s. But now looking at our process, our evolution. So Portugal, like Spain, 50 years ago, transitioned from an autocratic regime into a democracy. And in 74, when this transition started, the military movement that was behind the start of this sort of, let's call it this revolution 50 years ago, had a program based on 3 Ds. So 3 words starting by D. One was decolonization, because by then we still had some colonies, mainly in Africa. The second D was democracy, and the third D was development. And the European Union and our accession to the European Union, by then the European communities, has everything to do with two of these Ds, with democracy and with development. Also in Portugal, like in Spain, there was a big evolution in different sectors, in connectivity, in education, in health, in environmental rules. But so regarding development in general, but also during this transition period, the majority of the Portuguese people and the majority of the Portuguese political parties, of the Portuguese politicians, made a clear link between becoming or recovering democracy in the 70s and acceding to the European Union, becoming a member of the European integration process.
I'm going to do a quick public service announcement. I can see people standing at the back, and there are a few seats. If you have an empty seat next to you, just discreetly look back and point to our friends at the back. Though, thank you. Team effort. There we go. As we do this, there is another maybe less fortunate anniversary coming up, which is in 12 days. It will mark 4 years since the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine. It doesn't look like this conflict will end anytime soon, despite our best
despite some of the mediation efforts. So I think the question is twofold. On the one hand, what do you see as necessary in terms of forms of support from Portugal, Spain, and others to continue to help Ukraine for the foreseeable future? And secondly, I know there's a lot of debates around defense spending and what is necessary, but I'm more sort of curious about maybe the bigger question of how do you view what is necessary for Europe, for the public to understand in terms of the needs for defense spending, maybe at a detriment sometimes of other priorities.
Okay, if I can start now. So, I mean, regarding Ukraine, let me start by underlying how strong is the support to Ukraine in Portugal. And I think it's always important to look at the map and see how far are we from Ukraine in Europe. We are somewhere in the middle between where we are here in the east coast of the US and Ukraine. But the support from the public opinion in Portugal is still very, very high. It has been consistently very high to Ukraine. We have received more than 70,000 Ukrainians in Portugal. And again, regarding receiving these Ukrainian refugees, the reaction in Portugal has always been very positive. And we keep on supporting Ukraine in humanitarian, financial, and military, in the military sectors. And also, regarding this support, you have our public opinion behind our efforts, including spending more money, especially since there was an adjustment in the transatlantic support to the Ukrainian efforts. Regarding spending more money in defense, yes, there's I think there's also a wide spectrum political support to spending more in defense. The world is changing. The threats are changing also, are more comprehensive, more widespread. And our public opinion understands that for sure.
Well, that's an interesting question. Europe has undergone 3 big transformations in the past 6 years, I would say. We first had COVID that affected the entire planet, but COVID required a united response from Europe, and we went for joint purchases of medicines and of vaccines, and that required an extra action from the European Union, and that required giving a step forward in procurement of medicines, what was really a first time for us. Then Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and that was an awakening also. In many aspects, it led us to deepening in this first movement that COVID had created to go for joint procurement, but this time it wasn't medicine, it was weapons and ammunition. So we went to transform our industry of defense purchases, and we started developing a series of rulings, the EDIP, the EDIRPA, the joint procurement, now the PEARL, to buy together for Ukraine, and many other regulations. And that brought us to the point where we are now, trying to reinforce European industry, stopping being naive, because we were naive for many years and we thought we would never again have war in Europe, and we felt protected by Article 5, this without any strength and any weapons. We thought that Article 5 in NATO would protect us. This wasn't true. And we've started procuring ourselves the strength of military capabilities, and we are working together in joint deployments and in reinforcing these joint procurements. This coupled with going to the markets to get financing for funding to recover. So we had the next generation, which was the first time Europe was going to the markets to borrow borrow money together to transform and regenerate our industries. After COVID, we had this next generation that is helping us renew our industries, be more green, because the Green Deal, the green energy, the green industry is a commitment that Europe is maintaining steadfast, and we will keep on that road. And this is being done through these next generation funding in a great part, more digital agenda, but always inclusive. It's always with an inclusive view, because Europe is also very much about its citizens, and the four freedoms from the very beginning take into account also the freedoms and the welfare of the citizens. So education, the social, and health are key issues for us. And this is interestingly being discussed today in Europe in a retreat of our leaders. There is a lot being discussed about the European competitiveness, because now we have to face also a new reality in the world. We have higher tariffs. We need to go look for other partners like the Mercosur or India to be able to trade with third countries. We count less on the multilateral system as we know it, and we have to renovate. And Europe has to reinforce to go more for an open strategic autonomy, and we have to review the system of voting in Europe, of decision taking. We are 27. Not all of us are together all the time. There are some countries that dissent, and we are thinking about going forward in different configurations, maybe 7 countries, as happened with Schengen, the Schengen system that allows us to move within Europe without a passport, without a document. That has been done for a group. The euro was embraced by a group. So we are deciding today whether we will be moving forward in certain aspects, capital markets, for instance, in smaller groups in order to be to go forward. And you were asking about other countries, because obviously there are many countries waiting for accession. And we will have to cope not just with 27, but with some more. And therefore, I think that deciding whether we can go forward in smaller groups and quicker, that can be essential in this moment of possible enlargement.
Ambassador, you hit all my favorite topics: competitiveness, innovation, and trade, which my students will have heard in my class when you were talking about moving in different groups. Academics talk about differentiated integration, so I'm just delighted. I wanted to ask you, though, about trade, because everybody, if we talk about here in Washington, everybody thinks about tariffs and protectionism, and yet Europe is really still moving in terms of trade. EU-India, discussions with CPTPP, but there is the issue that is probably very interesting and important to Spain and Portugal, and that's Mercosur. And it's held up again. And I just wondered if you could talk to us about, what is Spain and Portugal doing to promote multilateral trade, to promote trade agreements, and particularly Mercosur?
Mercosur has been under discussion for 25 years. And and we'll see if it's finally approved by all members, European Parliament, etc. But it's a key response for the countries of the Mercosur and for the countries of Europe, we have to open new markets, obviously, looking for lower tariffs. This multilateral trade system has been dismantled, and thus we have to reinvent it, to redesign it. So Mercosur is one, India is another. With China, we are also trying to not decouple, but to de-risk. We have a big deficit in Europe, and certain countries have a bigger deficit. That's our case. This is why we have to keep on negotiating with them to find a level playing field in certain aspects. Although we want all in Europe to protect key and strategic areas, critical infrastructures, critical areas, and obviously we are part of the West, and we want to maintain our values, and that's very much related to how we negotiate and we deal with China. But having these new partners is essential, and we will keep on trying to enlarge these partnerships, which doesn't mean that all our citizens are happy. I read today that some agricultural areas in Spain are very much against Moroccan tomatoes, etc. I mean, because the European Union Morocco trade agreement is also on the table and has been for many years. So, but anyway, we need to keep on trading.
Just two notes from my side to complement. One about the Mercosur, EU-Mercosur agreement. I'm very optimistic. I mean, in my years of dealing with European affairs, I've seen other agreements going back and forth during the negotiation, and then once negotiations have been finalized, sometimes being ratified only, or not being ratified, but by some national parliaments or even by some regional governments. In this case, in some European countries that are also that also have federal systems, and beyond all these hiccups, disagreements have been in place. So regarding Mercosur, I think we need to wait a little bit more time, but the most difficult part of the process is that I trust that in a not far distant future, we'll see this agreement entering into force. And my second note is more general and is about the resilience of trade. I mean, we both had experiences dealing with trade agreements that were long time negotiated and then didn't reach a breakthrough. But at the same time, if you look at the way the trade between these two regions or these two countries evolved, even when you don't reach a trade agreement, what happens many times, I would say almost always, is that trade continues to rise, continues to go up. So trade is very resilient. And if you look at our transatlantic trade relations, 10 years ago, we were negotiating a far-reaching free trade agreement, a real free trade agreement, the TTIP. And then at the end, we could make it. But when we look at the actual trade figures, transatlantic trade agreement, trade in general kept on going up.
So I'd like to ask a question about China here, because it feels that we're in an interesting situation at present. The first Trump administration put a huge emphasis on strategic competition with China, arguably less so now. The Commission in 2019 had its own version with China being an economic partner, a rival, and yes. Am I right? been a long year. It's been a long year already. A triad, and arguably there's been quite a bit of movement within the EU, although there's still differences of appreciation. And there's a sense that maybe for the EU, in trade, it's important to diversify its partners, but you don't want to increase dependencies either. So I'm just curious about where is all the Spanish and Portuguese perspective as present in terms of to what extent it's important to still work with China, to what extent is it still needed to be really treated with great care? So what is the sort of mood right now towards working with China?
Okay, well, if I can start this time, in this effort of diversifying trade, trade with China is already there. As my colleague said, we have immense numbers of trade with China. I think this goes for the EU in general, but also for each and every European Union country. So China is already an economic partner. Then the balance is precisely what you very rightly mentioned, between being this already quite comprehensive economic partner and looking at aspects where our national security could be at risk. And from that point of view, we continue to look at not only at China, but at the rest of the world from the point of view of an utmost need for cooperation, for coordination between our allies and partners on this side of the world. And for example, Portugal has decided some years ago that for our telecommunication system, for our 5G network, for national security, because of national security perspective, we would only accept companies coming either from NATO, from the EU, or from the OECD.
Human relations begin always with trading. That's the truth. We've always exchanged it, and this is how all starts. So with China, we trade. We all trade. The US trades a lot, and we trade in Europe. And this is why I said that we need to keep on talking to China to reach this level playing field and to, agree on a fair competition and on a fair trade. We had the World Trade Organization for this purpose, where they join us. Now everything is dismantled, as I say, so Europe needs to keep on trading. My government, my king, have been traveling to China or receiving Xi Jinping in the past 4 years on a yearly basis. We never joined, though, the Belt and the Road Initiative. And last year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of our bilateral relations. It is also key to have China on board against Russia. And this is a message we've been passing to the Chinese authorities for these years, asking them to stop the war on Ukraine. So it was essential for us to keep on counting on China for this purpose. But we need China also to fight against climate change and against so many threats for mankind. We are not isolated. We are a global village. We realized that during COVID. So we need China also to tackle those issues. So de-risking is key. With them, decoupling is impossible. And we need to live with this reality. As with Portugal, because also European regulations imposes on us, critical infrastructures are exempt from the touch of certain Chinese companies, obviously telecommunications companies. So there are certain areas where we cannot hire those companies, and we would go for US or European or other Asian companies. But the reality is we need to keep on to keep on maintaining those relations, you, the US, and all European partners.
Just additionally on this need for cooperating and results of cooperation. I mean, we have in our bilateral relations with China that are very old. I mean, we started dealing with China more than 500 years ago. And 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, we started and completed very successfully a negotiation process between Portugal and China about the return to Chinese administration of Macau, of a Chinese territory that Portugal administrated for 450 years. And these negotiations between Western democracy and the Chinese government went very smoothly, and the result was successful in terms of transition in Macau from the Portuguese to the Chinese administration.
I want to ask a question. So Spain has just introduced a social media ban for under 16. And Portugal Parliament is right now discussing the same social media ban under 16. But it raises a question, and I know US states are also introducing some social media bans, but are you seeing, there's a lot of tension and friction on sort of the technological platforms and so forth between the US and EU. Can you think of areas that, in terms of technology, especially with your Digital Services Act and your Digital Market Act, areas that the US and EU can cooperate? And could you tell us why you introduced this social media ban? You seem to be at the forefront of it, the Spaniards and the Portuguese, and I think the EU is very interested.
Well, in our case, if I'm well informed, it's still a resolution, a suggestion from the parliament to the government. So it's still in the beginning of the process, and it's I think we are still a bit far from seeing where it ends up, what will be the mechanisms, and probably with different indications depending on also on the different age groups that we are right at the beginning. Regarding the digital transition, I mean, there are many areas where the EU and the US not only can cooperate, but are already cooperating. The US and the EU have been at the forefront of setting standards around the world as technologies evolve, and this has not stopped. And my sincere hope is that we manage to continue to do the same, because this. I mean, the companies and the technologies are evolving so fast that if we cannot do it together, somebody will do it. And we all have seen in the history of technological evolution that even if and when, and it happens, of course, very often, technologies evolve very fast. There's a number of standards and of common of rules that should be as outspread and as common as possible in international terms, because these technologies do not recognize borders. And history shows us that it's beneficial to our companies, to our citizens, if we can get together, not only among European Union member states, and of course our decision-making process, and we can speak about that later if you want, is sometimes cumbersome. It takes time, but it has been successful in this area, but also if we look at the transatlantic link in general.
we haven't passed so far the legislation. I think it's just a project, but I hope it goes forward. My son is 14, and I'm very sorry he's not living in Spain because he won't be protected by this measure. But I'm very scared that this social media can lead to spreading terrorism information, sexual harassment, violence, and there is no control. So what can be a crime outside the social media has to be a crime also in social media. And therefore, we need to have the responsible from those social media accountable for spreading this misinformation or this violence or this terrorism, terrorist propaganda. So I think this is key, and Europe is planning to regulate, as is Australia. Some countries in Europe are also adhering to this idea to prevent these algorithms to get to children before turning 16. I guess you all know of people who cut themselves, teenagers who cut themselves or go into anorexia practices because they are impelled by social media to do so. I know some of them. So I think that this will protect our youth without prejudice to their freedom of expression, etc. We all were very free without having to suffer these information that they can't digest because they are not prepared, their minds are not prepared to digest that. So regulation is coming, and also within the UN last year, Spain and Costa Rica launched an initiative to have the same kind of regulation on artificial intelligence as we have in climate change. For climate change, we have this panel of experts, panel of scientists to try to see how we regulate the efforts we do to stop the emissions and temperatures rising. So we are trying to replicate this architecture in the UN to try to see how we protect and we regulate a sphere where there are plenty of loopholes. So it has been going much quicker than our capacity to regulate or to understand or to realize where we are. And we need to focus on that. Obviously, we will keep on defending freedom of expression because it's really the core of our values here and in Europe. And I think that, well, that's healthy for everybody.
All right, so this is a time when you all have to shine as well. So you'll notice 2 platforms, 2 microphones. Please start stepping up with them if you want to ask a question. A few rules. Be polite, introduce yourselves, be concise, and remember the words of the French singer Edith Piaf, you ne regrette rien. You don't want to be regretting meaning to ask a question. So please come on, don't be shy. We'll probably take a few questions at a time, just that way. We will definitely be taking several questions. Start on this side, and maybe if I can have the 2 gentlemen ask that question in succession. Again, introduce yourself and please be concise.
My name is Jared Engel. I would like to know, Spain has been increasing its international development and humanitarian aid spending, whereas the US has mostly cut it and a lot of other EU countries have cut it. I'm just curious, what new priorities does Spain want to work on with that increased funding, and where does it think it will make a difference? Thank you.
Hello again, ambassadors. My name is Alan, and I wanted to ask, what is your opinion and what do you think are potential solutions to the aging population in Europe and specifically in Portugal and Spain? What were your ideas? What do you see society reacting? How do you see this in social change? Thank you.
Spain believes very much in multilateral system. We think, as I said, that we live in a global village. We solved what we could from the pandemic, the COVID pandemic together. We have the 17 SDGs. These Agenda 2030 and its financing is key for us. And this is why we hosted the 4th conference on financing development last year in July in City. We need to keep on showing third parties in our world that we care of hunger, poverty, climate change, and we are all one. So I'll refer to migration, but climate change means displacement of people, and this means we have 100 million people, refugees, walking around looking for a better place to live. So humanitarian aid is key because we live in this place, and especially if some partners decide to retire from the donations for a while, okay, we need to keep on financing. Now, on demographics, we live in the demographic winter. I guess the Spanish government is one of the few who is claiming openly we need migrants. Spain has 13.8% of its workforce now composed of migrants. We are in a process of legalizing, documenting around 500 to 700,000 people. We can only keep on growing and keep on paying our pensions, our education system, our health services if we have migrants at home, because we don't produce children.
So instead of going directly to the question on the aging societies, let me just add also on development. I know the question was essentially to Spain, but just to tell you that we are also maintaining our development, our levels of development cooperation and financing, and we are mainly doing it in two areas of the world, in Africa, and directing also to the seeds, to the small island development states, and it has a lot to do with climate challenges and climate change in countries that are mostly affected by this phenomenon. And I mean, as a maritime country, country with a triangle with 2 archipelagos, we understand that very well. On aging societies, well, yes, we are doing our best. Portuguese governments have been applying tax measures, have been applying some other kind of incentives, including trying to convince people not to move that much from the interiors to the coastal parts of continental Portugal. But I mean, as and many other more economically developed societies, if we can put it like that. Also in Portugal, people are having less children, and so also in Portugal, we are receiving more and more migrants. And if you compare with 40, 50 years ago, Portugal was mainly a society of migrants that would leave Portugal to live and work in other parts of the world. And nowadays we are mainly a society that receives migrants. Of course, like also in many other economic developed societies around the world, sometimes the pace of this change of the number of migrants that each society receives brings some challenges also relating to the way people are willing to be more welcoming to whoever comes and help us continue our economic development. So what has been happening lately in Portugal, like again in other countries, is that some measures have been put in place to avoid that the number of illegal migrants continue to rise, and instead trying to bet more and more in managed migration.
I'm going to take 3 questions here, and also ambassadors, feel free to divide the labor in terms of answering just for, for time. As you can see, there's no shortage of questions. So 3, again, be concise.
Speak normally, but my name is Ryan Curtis. I'm a student. Work here. Spain and Portugal seem uniquely intertangled with Latin America. We talked about trade and also history and language. The Trump regime seems very intent to have Latin America as a kind of sole imperial sphere of America in its mind, independent of international law, independent of influence from other states. How does Iberia and Europe as a whole intend to support its friends in Latin America?
Thank you so much. Fairly Van Tassel, the president of the internet. On how Spain and Portugal ties with regulate. Right, regulate the internet. Obviously, read the news surrounding immigration, education, and cost of living has created a lot of social tension. Within this, there's clearly room for potential targeted disinformation campaigns, foreign-wide influence, whether through Russian disinformation or through Chinese technological and telecommunication leverage. Outside of social media bans, what steps are your respective countries taking for protect against hybrid threats? And how does that fit into a greater European security framework and campaign? Thank you.
Doctors, my name is Aaron. I'm a third year. And the question I had is sort of mostly with the new Trump presidency, as you've all seen, the Trump has adopted a policy attitude towards many countries, including countries started as new ally. Despite this confrontational attitude, do you still see areas that the U.S. and their 2 countries, or the U.S. and the EU, can work together pretty much?
America's information and electronic cooperation. Actually.
Yes, so if I can start to Latin America, I mean, I think we talked already about the agreement between Europe and Mercosur, and this is a concrete sign that European Union countries, so the European Union in general, and its member states, including Portugal and Spain, are betting and are continuing to bet on the relations with countries in Latin America. So I don't see any reason for this bet to change, and I don't see also any reason for Portugal and Spain not to continue to be part of the European Union member states that are defending, that are among the staunch defenders of this deepening of relationship between the European Union and Latin America. Then hybrid threats, cyber threats. Well, this goes much beyond the measures regarding social networks directed to young people. And we have been working relentlessly in this area for a long time, and always in cooperation among European Union member states of NATO, member states of the OECD, also member states of the UN. This is an area where the UN has been more and more involved, especially in talking about ways of dealing collectively with these threats, because cyber threats are the typical kind of threat and challenge that has to be dealt with collectively, because if there's area where you don't have borders, is certainly the cyberspace. So I don't see any reason for this cooperation not to continue. On the contrary, I see all the reasons for this cooperation to continue and to be strengthened. And I can ensure you that as we speak, this cooperation is going on a daily basis. And the third question was about Yes, the transatlantic. So just two notes from my side. The first on the economic area. Of course, we all saw what happened during the last year, during the year of 2025 and at the beginning of 2026. And I talk often with European companies, of course, Portuguese companies, or mainly Portuguese companies that invest in the US, and with American companies that invest in Portugal and in other European countries. The majority of these companies were, of course, worried with instability in the kind of rules applied to trade. They would, of course, prefer to decide to take their decisions on the base of as much stable as possible rules. But I didn't find one, not even one company, that is no longer interested in trade or investment with the other side of the Atlantic. And I'm speaking about Portuguese and other European countries interested in operating or exporting or importing from the American market, and also the other way around. American companies that are operating, investing, exporting or importing from Europe. And the second note is about security. Every time NATO as our main base for security, defense, and deterrence as a defense alliance, and I mean, we are founding member of NATO. We have been together in this for a very long time, but every time this basis for our common security and common defense is questioned, then we are giving advantages to the ones that want to see us more fragile.
On Latin America, Spain and Portugal have a unique relation to Latin America. It's family, simply. So no matter who comes here to the room where you are with your family, it keeps on being family. We share language, history, culture, lullabies, everything. And trade, we share trade. We are present in those countries. To put you an example, Spain has around 700 companies working in the US, and we have 8,700 in Mexico. So it's not comparable. And we have a very good relation from the European Union also. We have this CELAC EU permanent relation built on maintaining good cooperation in infrastructures, tax policy, etc., etc. So we will keep on having these family ties with Latin America. And for Portugal, Brazil is it's super family, and for us, the Spanish-speaking countries are too. As is the UK and Australia and Ireland for the US. So you can understand it because it's something that you feel more than you put it intellectually. Cyber threats, I don't have anything to add to what you said. It's also a field where we work very closely with the US. And another on cooperating with the US, obviously with this administration, we keep on working. Now it costs us 15% more in trade, but we keep on trading. We keep on working in NATO, but there are many more instances in the US where we work with you, all of you, civil society, foundations, think tanks, governments, local powers, mayors. So the US is huge, and we have lots of ties everywhere, and we keep on building these ties everywhere. Our companies work at the level of all 50 states, and these will keep on being a very close cooperation. And many of you are traveling to Portugal, to Spain, and renew these this friendship every day. So I think that we share the same values, very important, same values, rule of law, our appreciation for freedom of speech, of movement, the same mindset, and this, which is the same as in Latin American countries, by the way, and this is what unites us. Thank you.
Can I push our luck to have a one very last quick speed round, or maybe I may take half of I apologize, I think 8's gonna be pushing it, but I'm gonna take 2 from each side. I'm just gonna ask you to be speedy as you can.
Excelente, His Excellency, thanks for being here. My name is Juan Pieza. I come from Madrid, Spain, and I wanted to ask a question specifically based my experience and many other people on the crowd and all around the country. The ambassador, you talked about companies, but I'm specifically want to focus more on people, specifically students and travelers coming here. With the current situation and the uncertainty about things on, I've noticed that when I've gone back to Europe, talking to my peers, that many of them say that they are not going to come and visit me because they're scared if their visa is going to get denied or they're not going to get accepted. And many students that are also in that situation. What is the role of Europe?
Gentlemen?
Hi, I'm Jason Steinbaum. I'm an adjunct professor in the School of Public Affairs. Ambassador Moreno, earlier you mentioned EU enlargement. One of the places that is looking to and has several aspirant countries is in the Western Balkans. I was hoping you could touch on, or you and Ambassador Lopez could talk on which of those countries you think is going to start moving forward. And Ambassador Moreno, if you could particularly talk a little bit about Kosovo, where most of your neighbors in the EU recognize Kosovo. Spain doesn't. When you think Spain might be able to do that? Thank you.
All right, speak a little bit quickly, please. Yeah, you got it.
Hi, I'm Noam. I'm a senior undergrad. Thank you so much for spending time with us. You guys mentioned China as a partner in terms of Ukraine. What does Spain pushing China on Ukraine look like? And how do you square that partnership with their strong economic ties to Russia, but also their partners, Iran and North Korea? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jaden. I'm a freshman SAS student. Within the last couple of years, we've seen a rise of authoritarianism in the United States because of course Portugal and Spain had experience with authoritarian governments. What is the advice you give the young people to stop?
All the diplomatic skills in those. Good luck.
With students and travelers, and yes, we hope that people keep on moving and going here and forth. From our embassies, we try to answer the anxiety of our citizens, and indeed there are people who are more unaware of what can happen if they travel, but in general, there has been no major problem for these students going to Spain or coming to the US. On EU enlargement, we are looking very closely to Ukraine, and this is something that follows a rule now. It's how much of their homework they do to get accession. We all had to go through a long process of adapting institutions to be able to join the union, and they will go through that process. It was already agreed a couple of years ago, and it's up to them now with our support, and we are there to support them. On Kosovo, it's not at the order of the day now. And on China, I already said that we have kept on talking to China to ask them to please pass the message to Russia that they had to stop their aggression on Ukraine. And this is why we need to keep on passing them that message. It doesn't mean that they will agree to what we ask to them, but our mission is to maintain dialogue. We consider that dialogue is essential, and that diplomatic dialogue is the only way forward in all orders of life.
Well, from my side, so students and travelers, I completely agree, and I also want to underline that we don't have much notices of big obstacles at the entry for students or for general travelers, and sometimes there's a big décalage, a big difference between what has been sometimes said and what happens at the borders effectively. On the EU enlargement. We both spoke right at the beginning about our experience of transition from autocratic regimes to democratic regimes. After, and I'm now speaking for Portugal, of course, after our accession to the EU in 86, 40 years ago, it only took around 15, 20 years for the EU to be again facing a big round of enlargement, this time to a good number of countries in Central and Eastern Europe. By then, all the economic studies showed that the Portuguese economy will be among the ones that would suffer the most if and when the Central and Eastern European countries would accede to the European Union. Even though our governments and our people stand clearly in support of the enlargement of the European, because we follow a very simple line. If we had the possibility, if we had the right to do it, so the other European countries should have the same possibilities and the same right. Now, because the question was also on where are we now? I mean, looking objectively, you have several countries, several candidate countries. The ones that are most advanced in the negotiations are clearly Montenegro and Albania. Montenegro already closed a third of the negotiation chapters. Albania opened up all the negotiation chapters. And there are other candidate countries, as you know. You read mostly about Ukraine, but it's not Ukraine. Regarding Ukraine, we have been always in favor of starting opening chapters with Ukraine. On autocratic regimes, I don't have special advices to give to anybody, but I always remember my experience because I was 10 years old when we recovered democracy in Portugal, and especially my memories from the 2, 3 years, 4 years that took us to stabilize this recovery of democracy, but also my life experience as a diplomat around the world tell me again and again that democracy and other values and principles connected with democratic societies are fragile. So we need to water this plant very carefully and in a continuous way.
So commemorations are trying to reflect on both the past and the future, and I hope we've given you plenty of opportunities to do that today. A warm thank you to all of you for being in the room today. The Transatlantic Policy Center really wants to be a platform to continue these conversations, and shameless plug, we do have a blog for students to take a deep dive, so please reach out. A warm thank you to all the people who make these events possible. My good colleague Alice over there in the back, our friends from the embassy, Carlo Antonio, Pedro, and Mafalda, and of course, to our 2 distinguished ambassadors who showed us poise, grace, and patience, and what it means to be an ambassador today. Thank you so much. You're always welcome.